Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Merci d'être avec nous ce matin pour dessiner donc un pays de l'arc-en-ciel, puisque c'est le thème de cette rencontre. Alors voici deux écrivains donc, qui se rencontrent en réalité pour la première fois à Nantes et auxquels on demande cette tâche de dessiner en moins d'une heure le pays de l'arc-en-ciel. Donc on va voir comment ils vont y arriver. Alors l'une c'est Sindiwe Magona. Bonjour Sindiwe, qui est arrivée il y a quelques jours du Cap en Afrique du Sud, où elle vit et où elle écrit, tout en ayant passé plus de 20 ans à New York, puisqu'elle a travaillé pour l'ONU pendant toute cette époque-là. Elle est née en 1943 à Umtata, en Afrique du Sud. Elle a grandi à Guguletu, c'est un township proche du Cap, et c'est là que se situe la tragédie qui a inspiré son roman publié en 1998 et enfin traduit en français par Sarah Lévis-Cordova.
It's Mother to Mother, published in French in the Mémoire d'Encrier. And we have it in French now. It's a beautiful book. So let me summarize the theme of this book. In August 1993, a young American student, Amy, came to South Africa to help prepare the first post-apartheid elections. And she was attacked, she was murdered by a group of young black boys in Guguletu. And with this reality, the writer imagined a letter that the South African mother of one of the murderers would write to the mother of the victim. So that was the first novel we're going to talk about today. We are going mainly to talk about the theme around this book. And the other writer is Fiston Mwanza. He doesn't come from RDC of Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo, but he comes from Austria. He lives in Graz, even though he was born in Lubumbashi in 1981, which is the main city of Katanga, the province of Katanga. And growing up in Katanga means something. It's the point of departure and arrival of trains full of workers working in mines. That was the theme of his first book. And read it, by all means read it. It was published in 2014. And here is the second book, Danse du Vilain. We're going to talk about this book today. Sindiwe's book can be summarized in one sentence in a way, but Fiston's book, we cannot summarize it in one sentence. It's a dance. It's a movement, a constant movement of books with characters, all sorts of different characters, all meeting in a bar. And it's a chronicle written like a piece of music. It's the story of life in Lubumbashi with characters coming from all sorts of different places. I will go into the details, but I just wanted to give you an idea of the atmosphere of those books. So the Rainbow Country is an idea developed by the Bishop Desmond Tutu. And maybe, Sindiwe, you could tell us a little bit more about this Rainbow Country. When did you hear this phrase for the first time? When did you hear that for the first time? What is the reality of this rainbow? What does it represent in your country and for the rest of the world?
Morning, everybody. I do not speak French.
That is not true.
Yeah. So I didn't quite understand what you were saying. So I would appreciate a translation of your question.
Oh, you
I didn't quite get the
you
question,
didn't
so
hear
if
the
you could give me a
translation.
translation of it.
I'm surprised you can't hear the translation. Did you hear the translation? Can you hear?
No?
Oh. Sorry about that.
Rainbow.
I am translating.
Yeah, okay. I'll talk about the concept of the rainbow nation. It's a term that I believe came out first of the mouth of one of our famous people, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who is known the world over. It's a phrase that depicts the great hope of what would happen in the country of South Africa post-apartheid. Now, the vision, no, it was okay before you touched it. Thank you. The vision was, for most people, was that when the legal oppression disappeared, the legal oppression, anyway, when the legal oppression was scrapped, there would be a normal, joyful life in South Africa. The oppressed and the former oppressors would get together and make a new life. There would be forgiveness. There would be, a coming together of the peoples of South Africa. That is why there was the TRC, to show everybody what had happened. Because after a disaster, not everybody understands what happened. We know the sad example of Europe and Germany and the Jews. And today there are people who said that didn't happen. In South Africa, growing up there, I thought everybody, especially white people, understood what oppression meant. As a child, I thought white people were very clever. They not only ruled everybody, they made all the laws, and I thought they understood what the laws did. To my astonishment, when I grew up, and when I grew out of my particular ghetto, and made encounters with people who were not classified as I was, whose color skin was different from mine. And this was not just meeting, it was a real encounter, which we consciously made happen. Because such things were not possible in South Africa. The separation was so concrete and complete that nobody, if you were classified this way, you had no idea of what happened then. And then my eyes opened. I am not here apologizing for white South Africans, but I understand why they could say, and they say, I did not understand. Around 1994, the people we classified the Boers, the Boere, the Boers, Amabulu, the Afrikaner, whom we believed were the main oppressors. The Boer women who were so obedient to their men and were crying out, "What have you done in our name? What have you done in our name?" This is what the Rainbow Nation was meant to do. Open everybody's eyes and then come together and work towards reconciliation. Unfortunately, it didn't quite happen like that. And today the young generation will say, "What rainbow? Where are the colors of this rainbow?" Thank you.
Merci, Sindiwe. Fiston.
Thank you, Fiston. I think that in your name there is something about the rainbow. Can we start? Could this be a starting point? Could we start with your name and then could you tell us about your country, the situation in your country, what it means in your country? My name, Mwanza Mujila, I come from Luba culture. And in the Luba culture, your name is like a tree. You have, your name is like an articulated tree, a tree that grows with all sorts of different branches. My name is Mwanza Mujila, and Mwanza Mujila was necessary on my passport, but in reality, my true name, my name is longer than that. One of my names, for example, in Mwanza Mongolo, it's rainbow. In the Luba mythology, the rainbow is the encounter of two snakes, male snake, Mwanzambala, and the female snake. So I am a female and a male snake meeting, they meet, and that is at the origin of the rainbow. One of my names is also a song, Mwanza Kongolo Mai. It's a song. The rainbow appears at 5 p.m., full of light. The rainbow comes at 12, full of sun, and so on and so forth. But this idea of the rainbow, Congo, as you know, is an extraordinary country. It's at the center of Africa, but we come from the south of the country, so we are in South Africa, really. I am defined sometimes as a South African. I have much more to do with Southern African people than with other African people. We have the same culture, the culture of mines. When you take the story of Johannesburg, it's same in Lubumbashi. At the beginning of the 20th century, they discovered mines in Lubumbashi, and they decided to build a city around these mines. So that was created in 1910 or so. The Belgian colonial administration decided to organize a major mining company, and they needed labor. They took people, local people, but people would tend to disappear, run away, and disappear in nature, in the local rainforest. So they took people from the center of Congo, from Kasai, and that's the people I'm coming from. And they came in the beginning of the 20th century to work in mines. They also went to Rwanda, everywhere in Congo, and even in southern African countries. the beginning of 1900, we had people coming from South Africa, from Rhodesia, ex-Rhodesia. They came to work in mines. And in those days, Lubumbashi was made of all sorts of different people. More than today, Jewish people came. There were Greek people from Greece, from Lebanon, Portugal, from Belgium, France. So these different people came from all sorts of different countries to work and live in this new town. So the city was divided into sort of compartments. There was the white city and the city made of local people, where local people lived. My grandfather didn't want to work in mines. So he was a boy, as we call that, he worked for Italian families, French families, and so on, until he decided to open his own bar. Monakabuya, it's one of the first bars of Lubumbashi. He opened this bar in 1955. Then after colonial days, this connection that existed between the two cities, the indigenous city, the local black city, and the white city. You know, when Europeans went back to Europe, Congolese local people had money, middle-class people. They decided to really live in this ex-white part of the city. And a country like Congo is similar to others. I mean, there are bad feelings. People are developing bad feelings when they come from Lubumbashi. They don't like those who came to work in their mines. Those coming from other countries, for example, were aware and they became managers, they became university teachers. And in 1990, there was local fights against those people coming from elsewhere. They were not local people anymore. And in Lubumbashi, it could become a source of inspiration in Congo. When we have to think about a common future, we have to design a common future. We have to think about this international court for Congo. For 20 years now, a genocide has been going on in my country. And everybody knows about it, and nobody cares about it. You have 9 frontiers around Congo, and the 9 frontiers have been broken except from Congo-Brazzaville. And when you take the eastern part of Congo, it's far west, you know, the people are slaughtered every day. 50,000 kids were born from rapes. How can you imagine such a situation? How can you change this situation? We come from Congo, Kinshasa, and South Africa can be a model for us. We have to redesign the future of Congo. We have to stop these conflicts. And we have to think about our future, redefine our future. Even if this model, as Sindiwe said, this model is obviously not that realistic. Yes, but it could be a starting point. We could look at what happened in Rwanda, for example. Let's take what was positive in South Africa. We could try and take positive things and copy them. You know, that's important, because today in Congo we are in a dead end. We should really move forward one step after the other. And this is what you're looking for in your book, isn't it? It's a quest, you know, it has no name. But this is what you're trying to do, move forward one step after the other.
May I answer quickly? Am I on? Okay. You know, perhaps I sounded too pessimistic about the situation in South Africa. Yes, I am pessimistic, but I am not that pessimistic that I think we should throw in the towel, which is why I wrote another book that you must read.
Ah, c'est son dernier livre. Voilà.
It's about South Africa. It's about, we have this saying, throughout Africa, it takes a village to raise a child. This book asks what happens when the village sleeps. What has happened in South Africa is that we have not taken care of our business. Yes, the structure is there. The theory is there. We are now free of oppression, but are we mindful? The legal oppression is gone. But as has happened elsewhere in Africa, is the real transformation for the poorest of the poor. In South Africa, when we came to our so-called freedom, 1994, I don't think I exaggerate. You can go to the stats. More than 60% of the population that looks like me. And the population that looks like me is the majority of people in South Africa. So that's a lot of people were barely literate. Now it's very difficult for people who are not, I'm not saying they are dumb. They just didn't get the opportunity to get an education. People like that are not critical in their thinking, especially when it comes to government. We transport the old system of government traditionally, where you obey the chief and the king, and we obey the elected officials who are supposed to be our servants. You should see when officials come into a room in South Africa, everybody stands, yes sir, yes sir. They should be saying yes sir to us. And so people believe everything that comes out of the mouths of the politicians. It's never questioned. It's never challenged. And as long as the politicians, vote for me, I give you bread, I give you... You should see what happens just before elections in South Africa. Truly, I'm not... Politicians go from house to... That's the only time you see them. Here's a basket of food. Here are blankets. You don't vote to get blankets. You vote for the people in parliament to do the right thing. You see, and that has, we need real and I wrote the book to challenge South Africans. We must, I'm sure we have enough brain power, heart power. Let's do something real and meaningful, which is what you are saying. I have hope that if people come together and not just dream a rainbow, work for a rainbow. The change we want is not going to happen automatically. We need to work for it, challenge what is. I'm not anti-government. I just want, I said in 1994 and before, I don't care. No, I won't swear. I don't care a bit what color the government is. I don't care about skin color, because your skin color doesn't tell me who you are. You can be blacker than me and be a swine. You can be a very white person with hardly everybody has melanin. Did you know that? Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter how fair-skinned you are, you still have melanin. Even if you have a little bit of melanin, you can be a very good person. Skin color doesn't tell me what kind of government you'll make. For me, we mustn't vote skin color, which is what is happening. Vote intelligence and heart and what the person will do for you, not for themselves, which is what is happening. Thank you.
Je voulais juste dire que...
Thank you.
What you're saying is very general to all of Africa. In Congo, for example, people vote according to the tribe the guy comes from. They do not vote with their brain. Each MP is elected by the people of his tribe. You should see electoral campaign. You have posters everywhere because people promote, they're selling their image. They're trying to go back to their village. They give T-shirts, food, as you're saying, as you're explaining. So it's a serious problem. It's very general to Africa. We have to go beyond this reality. We have to do something else. Most African countries were created in the Berlin Conference in 1885. They took Africa, they divided it in lines and bits and pieces, and some people have no connection one with the other, you see, but they have to live together. And that's the difficulty. You have to go beyond the ideal of one nation. In a country like Congo, I wouldn't say that it is a country, a nation. It's like you have peoples who are put together. They have to live together in the same space. So we should go beyond their differences, beyond the tribe connections. We should invent a country, a nation. And this invention could be done in a specific context, meeting points, with education, proximity, with cultural connections. And Sindiwe, in the Guguletu you grew up into, you're talking a lot about neighbors in the during the childhood of the future murderer, and his mother, because she's telling about her own childhood in this township. What are the meeting points? Where do people meet in those townships? They meet not only the same color of skins, but male, women, men. Rainbow is made of that as well. There are all sorts of differences in a rainbow, more than the color of the skin. Where was that possible in a township like Guguletu?
It was possible then because we had this one big enemy, apartheid. But after apartheid disappeared as an enemy, it's only now beginning to show that people realize that there are other divisions. For me personally, I don't believe in any division. There is one race, the human race, and nothing else matters. You are a human being, and that's the starting point. And, where you came from, what color skin you wear, what gendering you are, all this does not matter. And when I read poets, Xhosa poets, my language is Xhosa, who wrote, the first writers when, the scripting came, late 19th century, early 20th century, and they address the coming of people who look like me from the north and how this should be dealt with. But this is not taught in schools today. This is not taught in schools today. Before 1994, I wrote an essay, about voting, what voting means. And I liken voting to what we do, poor people do everywhere. It's like sending a child to the shop. We didn't have servants, so the children worked in the home, not paid job. But you worked as soon as you could do something. You helped your mother sweep, you went to the, but we also send children to the shop. If you send a child to the shop, you give them enough money for what you want. You tell them exactly, if you want half a loaf of brown bread and it costs so much, you give them that or a little more. If you expect change, and what time it takes to get to the shop and back. And there's the old African way before watches of watching time. It's all over in the Caribbean too. If this dries and you are not back, you'll get it from me. And so the child knows they must go to the shop and they must not play a lot along the way and they must come back before that spittle dries. voting is like that. You could explain voting. The people we send to parliament are no better than us. They are us. It's just that we can't all fit into that house. So we choose some among us. These are our children that we send to that shop called parliament. And we must give them jobs to do. We want you to do A, B, and C. And the time is the time between this vote and the next. And we are going to watch that you bring the goods we ask you to bring. And if in 4 years you have not done it, out. We send that. You don't send the same stupid child who loses the money, who doesn't bring the change, who brings the wrong thing. Do you think anybody wants to publish this essay in South Africa? No, no. But for me, this is, because you see, we will never have a real transformation until the people who missed out on education understand this new concept of government. And as long as they don't understand it, they'll vote for the same color, for the same clan, for the same language group, and that is not democracy. You know, the reason the printing press was invented a long time ago, don't expect me to remember the year, is so that voters can understand their rights and hold the officials, you know, to accountability. This is not happening. We have to bring this notion of why you vote to the people so that they understand their duty. Voting is, democracy is not about making a cross against somebody's name or face, because really this doesn't matter. What matters is who you vote for, what you want them to do. Do you watch that do you put them on alert? Sir, ma'am, I want A, B, I expect this, and if you don't do it, don't expect a vote from me next time. It's simple, but people don't understand it. It's a simple notion. If you are, like me, half educated a little bit, you understand it. But, you know, people, like if my mother was still alive, she was alive for the... You have to explain it, that you vote for this one because they speak the same language. It's what they promise you. And it's not a blanket. It's something much bigger than a blanket. Thank you.
Oui, il y a d'ailleurs dans le dernier livre...
As a matter of fact, in the last book, you've shown us in the cover the story of a young South African girl in a ghetto. When they're pregnant, they drink a lot of alcohol in order to get compensation from the government because their child might be handicapped.
Yeah.
And this reality inspired you.
I don't know that I would use the word inspired. It's not an inspiration. I don't know what I'm going to call it. I'll remember the word just now. It's not inspiration, but I was so saddened to read front page of a magazine. There's a 16-year-old holding a baby. She's being interviewed by a social worker. She says I started trying to get pregnant from when I was 13. I used to drink before I got pregnant. But once I got pregnant, I started taking drugs. I wanted this baby to be deformed. Can you believe it? I wanted this baby to be deformed. A normal child, the child grant is 300, was then 300 rand, is now 400. But when this story, it was 300 for a normal child grant. For an abnormal child, 1,400 and something. You know, my grandmother and that generation, people who never went to school, people we called amakaba, the red blanketed, you know. Those women smoked the long pipe. They smoked. And they drank the beer they brew. But as soon as they had the baby here, they stopped that. And this Kaba woman would say, "Hi, look, I'm now, eating for 2 people proudly." But she knew she had to stop the nonsense. And today, a young woman who shouldn't have had a baby in the first place at 15 and 16, but never mind, consciously chooses to maim the fetus in her womb. And yet South Africa doesn't declare any crisis. In the world, South Africa is the leading country for FAS, fetal alcohol syndrome. No crisis has been declared. Even in Africa, the poorer countries in Africa, when you take that international reading scores, blah, 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 blah. In South Africa, in Africa, we are the last. Other countries do better than us. We are, I think, second from the bottom in the world, or fourth, doesn't matter, but we are in the bottom. Kids in grade 5 can read for understanding. They can comprehend what they are reading. Leading, people with big brains, professionals and things, say publicly, the education of the black child in South Africa now is worse than during apartheid. And in the middle of the 1980s, just before the end of apartheid, this is how much the apartheid government was spending on the education of our children. $480 a year for a white child, $280 a year for a colored or Indian child. For a child who look like you or me, $28 a year. But today, the education of a child who looks like you is worse than that $28 a year education. Go figure.
Tout ça n'est guère optimiste, mais les faits sont là. Et je voulais.
Actually, this is really not optimistic, but I know that you're saying facts. So let's go back to Congo, Fiston, in order to know in what measure your characters who dance together, the villains dance. This is the title of your book, and I would like you to tell us about it. Is this bar like the one you saw at your grandparents in Lubumbashi, and we see children from the streets, from the townships, living a life of poverty, of survival? Is it comparable? Because you said that there are strong connections between Katanga and South Africa. So you've got sorcerers' children, secret agents, Mr. Guillaume, an Austrian writer, a character that appeared in Tram 83, your former book, looking for inspiration in the poorer suburbs of Lubumbashi, and he will be warned and summoned to write about the lives of the people. So this rainbow, is it made of different places like these ones, or people coming from all over the world and meeting in Lubumbashi? I really felt like, even in my book, Tram 83, in the way I write, I try not to have main characters. All the characters are secondary characters, and from short stories, I build up a novel. So it's not a novel as people tend to understand novels. Little stories, short stories, building up to make up a novel. I've got this copper bracelet, and life in Congo and Lubumbashi is connected with mining, because mining supports the city, and we're still in that mining culture. But what is new in comparison with colonial era, there was a plant, Jocamil, then it was called Union Minière, and it was a plant, but beyond the plant, they also organized schools, hospitals, and people were paid according to the number of their children. So the more the children, the more maize flour, for instance, the more money. So everybody wanted to have a lot of children. My parents didn't work in the mining industry because they always wanted to be independent, so they worked in their bar. But generally speaking, in Katanga, everybody is connected one way or another to the mining industry. And that's why in every family you could have 8, 9, 10 children. But then that company went bankrupt, people were jobless, and they weren't able to send all their children to school. So many children started to be looked at as sorcerers in the 80s, and many children had to flee. So there are street children who have had children. So it's the second, third generation of street people in Kinshasa, in Lubumbashi, thousands of people who live in the street and travel around the country because they can take a train from Lubumbashi to the other part of the country, and this is the way they travel around. And so the conductor in a train could detain a child in a train. That was possible, but when you have 20 of them, it's difficult. And the conductors don't do anything anymore. So these people, these street people, know better the city, actually, than people who live in houses, because they know what happens in the streets. So we've got street children, marginalized people, and I like to give them the power to speak up, to express themselves through my little stories. And now to go back to the title, the Villain's Dance. It's my alter ego. I live in Austria. I've been living in Austria for a few years, and World War II has never been debated upon in Austria. It's like a taboo. But in every street, you have signs where the name of that person who was deported and who used to live in that street, and whether that person survived deportation or not. And I've always been shocked at the sight of these signs and the silence about World War II. So that urged me to write a novel with a character being Austrian Jew. So it's a paradox. So in what way I could speak about World War II and the deportation of Jewish people and the silence about it. So I decided to have a character called Franz Bogartner, who wants to write about Congo, but he's challenged, but he doesn't feel legitimate to speak about Zaire, Congo, and those street children of Lubumbashi. So legitimacy of being able to write about slavery, some famous people, Jewish people, have struggled to have the right to speak about slavery. We are not spoiling the end of the book, but the matter of cultural appropriation, this France character is quite a positive one. So do we have the right to write about any issue, wherever we come from? In this novel, there is a transfiguration of my character, because he writes the villain's dance, but from the jail. I live in Graz, in Austria, and I think I'm entitled to write about that part of the Austrian history, but from my perspective, my sensibility, because World War II, it's also a global history. The Katanga was part, actually, of the making of the first nuclear bomb. The two first nuclear bombs had components from Katanga, and also caoutchouc was sent from Congo for making tires for army vehicles. So I think from my perspective, I can speak of a Jewish family who ran away and decided to settle in Congo and make a parallel with a Jewish family in Austria. And the Congolese army also fought with Italy in Ethiopia. So through soldiers' figures, I think we can build up a story from a subjective perspective. Sindiwe Magona, what do you think of this challenge? Because Mother to Mother is a black South African mother from the township who speaks up directly to an American mother, the mother of the victim, but she doesn't know her. She doesn't know anything about her. So she takes a risk. She's audacious, and you are audacious to speak directly to that mourning mother, and all the world was watching. But you write. So, isn't there any lesson to draw from the other universe? So the whole world was watching the family of Ami Bill, and you decided also to have a look at the mother of the young murderer. So it was a way of drawing a rainbow. So sorry for maybe clinging to that image, but isn't it somehow this too?
Thank you. This whole question of misappropriation, I do not understand, but then I'm not an academic. I don't understand how we can say at one and the same time, all people are the same. But Oh, I cannot understand you because you are white. You cannot understand me because I'm black. I cannot write about her because she's differently abled or disabled. You know what I mean? I cannot understand it because she's a gendered or he's a gendered person. I cannot. Then we are saying difference matters more than that. The difference of appearance is bigger than the oneness of humanity. I don't want to believe this. We all have the same emotions. We all have the same, I mean, you don't have to be the same colored person or to be the same age or to have the same level of education to know that if I put a knife through you, you feel pain. We understand this. So if you say difference matters so much, there can be no empathy. So why are we reading novels of different cultures? To do what? If it is not to promote exactly that. The word you use about being inspired is being provoked, really. I am provoked into writing about things. I was provoked into writing about. I am provoked into writing about. It's something in me that reacts, not violently, I shouldn't use violently, reacts strongly to a situation. And then I feel, like with the Amy Bill thing, I knew in my culture, and I knew that one of the mothers, that's one of the reasons I wrote the book. I grew up with one of the mothers. And I knew her as a zestful, witty person. She would do the traditional thing. She would go to Amy's, if she could. She would tell her how sorry she was. And of the 4 mothers, guess which one ended up in a relationship with Amy's mother? This one I wrote about. It just for me was obvious. Nontutu Zelo would want to go to Amy's mother. And I also wanted to write this book because the then president of South Africa declared an hour of, everybody stand still, do nothing, observe this. Then there was a day of marching through the streets of Guguletu to make the streets of Guguletu not violent. The streets of Guguletu were violent long before Amy was killed there. And marching through the streets of Guguletu one day a year is not going to change that. And so I wanted to highlight the real reason Amy died. Yes, those 4 young men killed her. There's no running away from. But they were really just instruments of the huge anger in the black community, the black part of the South African nation, against anything white. She died because she was a white person in a black township when there were signs, do not enter this township if you are not black. She died because of the goodness of her heart, that she didn't believe in divisions. And the blind hatred in the hearts of these young men. If she were not white, she would not have died. But though those 4 young men killed Amy, my firm belief is that all South Africans killed Amy Bill for allowing race hate to get to those levels. We killed her. And the sooner the nation recognizes that, the better. Because we are all culpable. Children are born innocent of ideas and beliefs. The parenting generation gives them those children who were in their teens or early 20s didn't manufacture race hate. The slogans, one bullet, one bullet, one white person, something like one bullet, one. They didn't create those. Those slogans were created by educated older minds, but they acted upon them. And to say all of us. And if we don't deal with the race hate, even today, politicians and other people will stand there, apartheid did this to us. That is fact, but that is also ancient history. I'm not saying don't forget it, but human beings are created to transcend, know it, and become a stronger person despite it. That's how you fight. You don't succumb. Oh, I am oppressed. You think your oppressor is going to come back and mend you? Then you are sillier than I think. Your duty as a human being is what you're doing, is to write, observe, and react. When I write about, I see no other. I don't other anybody. When I write about somebody, I'm not for a minute believing that I'm 100%, I will always make mistakes, but I take the risk to make those mistakes. It doesn't matter whether the person looks like me or doesn't look like me, if I write about my own sister, I will make mistakes. We write knowing we are just bumbling about. I don't know about you. I never think I'm going to be 100% right about everything, and the book is going to. I know what my hope for the book is, but every reader will interpret the book differently. So we might as well just make the mistakes and write.
And actually, you were telling, and I'm sure your readers will check that, your book is universal because it's two mothers, or a mother speaking to a mother about issues that could affect anyone. We can think about the situation between Palestine and Israel, for instance. Fiston, I don't know if you feel like reacting to the following sentence we can find in Sindiwe Magona's book, a bullet, a white person. So that slogan in Guguleto referring to apartheid. For Sindiwe's book, the book takes place in the 90s, and your book takes place at the end of Mobutu's era. Much tension then, much hope too, and in parallel with the colonial era, the history of Zaire, how this message, a bullet, a white person. In Congo, this sentence could be understood as the way we manage our memory with the Belgian regime. Congo became private property of the King of Belgium, and he managed this land as he would with his garden. And so African languages are marginalized, all the African religions and faith are deleted. So all the identity of people, language, culture, religion, traditions are just cancelled. And changing the name of the country, Belgian Congo, it was an intent of the colonial power to delete the Congolese memory. And in 1960, with our independence, the new government tries the same policy, saying that Congo was born in 1960 and there was nothing before. And actually, with the same policy, you change the name of the country. We forget about our past. We forget about what happened with Lumumba. And what starts with me, Mobutu, is new. And in 1997, once again, we changed the name of the country. So our country changed names 5 or 6 times. It was the independent state of Congo, then Belgian Congo, then the Republic of Congo, then Independent Republic of Congo, then Republic of Zaire, then Democratic Republic of Congo. So each time there is a political event, we delete, we erase the past. We forget everything, and it's craziness, because when Kabila decided to go back to Congo for naming the country, so we went on using Zairean passports, but we became Congolese. So before you could check us, you could look us up with starting with letter Z, and then we had to change to letter C at the beginning of the alphabet. So I think we haven't drawn any lesson from history, because we don't look at ourselves after deleting our past. Mobutu was the devil. There was nothing good in what he did. So we have to erase Mobutu. But it would have been wiser maybe to keep some values upheld by Mobutu, such as our traditions, promoting African languages and cultures. But because we systematically erase our past, for any new election, we erase the past. This is something we can feel in your second book, Davelin's Dance. And it's already the time to conclude. There was also a poem in your book that you could have read, but we don't have time anymore. We will have time another time in the framework of this festival. And also, I strongly advise you to read this book, Mother to Mother, with a comment by Veronique Tadjo, who knows South Africa very well. And at the end of your book, Fiston Mwanza Mujila, you have a discography, because your book is dedicated to musicians who have inspired you, and I say inspired you. So this is the last note of this session, and I'm sure that you can meet our authors soon in the bookshop.